Hi, and thanks for tuning in to the CBA Podcast, a place where we chat about our own recent achievements in the area of electronics, software and mechanical engineering, and more likely than not, give excuses for not having done anything at all. Hello and welcome back. I think the last episode was about 3 weeks ago, and to be honest I didn't do that much in the meanwhile, so as usual I'll talk a little bit about what I did, and then what my plans are for the near future, and finally news and upcoming events. Like last time, I'm doing the podcast while standing up. Laptop is now sitting on a shelf in a cupboard, not running from mains but from its own battery, so I have about an hour to do this podcast, which should be plenty. And also I'm aiming for quick recording where I have to do almost no editing, because editing is starting to become a pain in the ass now. It shouldn't take long because there shouldn't be much editing, but for some reason it's taking too long. It's probably me nitpicking too much, so we'll see how that goes. A couple of episodes ago I talked about equipment that I often use or never use or anywhere in between, and one of the things I never use is a big HP 3455A digital multimeter. It's a bench multimeter. It's quite accurate, quite good, quite heavy and quite big, and it was just taking up shelf space. So I sold that on internet on a second-hand local marketplace, eBay-like site is marktplaats.nl, which is a Dutch second-hand site. And the funny thing is I sold it to the same guy whom I bought it from in the first place, and I think he used to refurbish or fix these things for his day job or something like that, and now he does it out of for his hobby. Also, the last time I talked about a TS100 soldering iron. Now, to be quite honest, I didn't actually use it yet on the road, but I got a separate PSU for that, so mains to 24 volts. I could use my laptop PSU, which is typical 19 volts, but I want those few extra watts. So I put everything in a nice pouch and it's just waiting to be used now. Last time I also talked about the HCC, that's the Hobby Computer Club I think in the Netherlands, or a Hobby Computer Club in the Netherlands called HCC. And they have different divisions. One division is the Retro division, which mainly deals with old or obscure computer stuff. And another division is the Commodore division, and they have a few other things for artificial intelligence and robots and Arduino and stuff like that. The last podcast was recorded just one day before their meeting for the HCC Retro division, and I think they have meetings twice a year, and I think there were 6 or 7 people present or something like that, not too much. Usually there were a few more, but this time there were 6 or 7. So I went there, had a very good time there. It was a lot of interesting talks, a lot of interesting people. One guy was making his own computer out of a industrial module with a 6809 on it. And he made his own assembler for that. He made the assembler in assembly. Made a terminal emulator for that, and now he's working on the BASIC, I think, for that thing. So that's quite nice. Another guy was also making his own computer, I think. To be honest, I forgot. It was also an interesting talk, very in-depth technical, so I liked it very much. So I have a feeling that a lot of people there are really in-depth technical. I also brought my own CPU, the Quebec transistor CPU that I talked about a few times, and some people also found that interesting, so that's nice. Talked about that a little bit. And in fact, one person asked me if I could do a small talk about that, and I'll probably do that. It's going to be somewhere in September for the next meeting. A few days afterwards, I became an official member of the HCC Retro division and also of the Commodore division, so I don't have to be ashamed next time I'll walk into a meeting for not being a member and not actually contributing with money. I think the next HCC Commodore meeting, actually I don't know when it is, but I think it's more often than twice a year, so it's in Maarsen, near Utrecht I think, in the Netherlands, and I'll probably be going there I went there a few times, but maybe to show my cartridge adapter thing, or to talk about that, or to see what people think of that, or to see what's up. I talked a few times already about the Retro Computer Place in the center of the Netherlands. That is in Utrecht. That is awesome space. And I went there again. The plan was to fix some stuff or to bring my old stuff. I think I brought my Commodore stuff there, or the remains of my Commodore stuff. What we actually did was find out which fuses correspond to which mains groups. So we basically turned off the power in the whole building and turned it on groups one by one and see which fuses it was and so on. Wrote it down and made a small chart. So this should be useful. I had a good time there. I had a nice talk with some people, nice work together with some people I saw a few times before, so that's actually very nice. Another thing that was nice there is that my cartridge adapter still works. I put it there I think about a month ago, and when I turned on the computer it still works and the screen still shows good, and it's all very nice. Good to see it still works. I think I talked a few times ago about how relaxing it was to take stuff apart, electrical stuff or mechanical stuff, because at the end of the effort you have a pile of crap that you can toss away and you learn something. Some doubt is gone or some mystery is gone, and you see that stuff may be not so difficult as you thought. At least for me that it works like that. So this time I took apart a safety valve for our laundry machine. Now I don't know if it's common in other countries, but over here sometimes you have a safety valve which is sitting in between the water supply and the water inlet of the laundry machine, and it has magnetic valve and a battery inside and a wire connected to two contacts. And the contacts are sitting on the floor, and if the floor floods, then the contacts are connected by the water and the valve turns off, so it prevents your attic or basement or whatever from flooding. And I was curious how that worked. Now I'll post a little schematic and a little picture of the thing in the show notes. It has a spring-loaded valve, and you can open the valve so that it conducts water, lets water through by pushing the spring, and then some metal part in the valve or in a lever connects to a permanent magnet, and a permanent magnet is just strong enough to hold the valve open. So attached to one leg of the horseshoe magnet is a electromagnet, and when this coil is energized, its magnetic field is opposite to the magnetic field of the permanent magnet, so the permanent magnet plus coil together, it's not strong enough to hold the valve. The valve is released by the spring action and the valve closes. I thought it was quite smart. The thing works with a 1.5 volt AA battery and a thyristor, I don't even know how to pronounce that. So when the contacts are closed, the thyristor fires, the coil is activated. Coil activates a reed relay, so the reed relay shorts the thyristor. So the thyristor energizes the coil first, and then the reed relay takes over. And basically, when you have a fail situation where your floor is flooded and the contacts are connected together, the device simply tries to close the valves to stop the water, and by doing that it drains its battery. Which is not a big deal, I guess, because the battery is probably cheaper than your floor. And if you're that interested to look in the schematic in the show notes, there is a 220 nanofarad capacitor drawn parallel to the reed switch and parallel to the thyristor. Now I'm not 100% sure what its function is. I think to make life easier for the thyristor. Also maybe to counter bounce from the reed switch, although I don't think reed switches bounce a lot. So if you happen to know, feel free to contact me. The email address is listed on the podcast.cba.si page. So there was a bit of feedback bait right there. A while ago I made a video, much too long video, 45 minutes or something like that, about different prototyping methods, electronic prototyping methods. So Vero board or breadboard or at your own PCB or whatever. And what I did now was try a new method by starting with a copper-clad PCB. So you have a full copper-clad surface on one side or both sides. Then you would draw your schematic pretty much like you would draw a schematic on paper. You would draw it on the copper on the PCB with a magic marker. So make sure that pins of components actually match the physical components. Then make the actual traces, or what would be traces on an actual PCB, visible by using a thicker magic marker. Then taking a Dremel or similar tool and a milling bit and isolating all the thick lines with the milling bit. So manually taking the tool and actually behaving like a CNC machine, milling out slots in between traces. And then I think the easiest may be to tin all the spots where component leads would touch the copper. First tin it, and afterwards place the components on it, and then reflow the tin so the components are stuck to the board. And that's basically it. I'll post a video of that in the show notes. It's much shorter, it's about 5 minutes I think, or 10 minutes. I think there are several advantages when you compare it to, for example, Vero board. Now with Vero board, the components are typically on the other side as the copper. So first of all, if you are debugging something, you would have to flip the PCB over all the time. Secondly, with this method, by milling out the slots or isolating the tracks manually, everything is on one side. Plus you have the actual components drawn and the actual schematic drawn on the board. So actually it is as if you're working in your schematic. So that's really intuitive, I think. So I'm quite happy with that. And the first thing I made was a LED flasher. I put that in the video. And the second actual thing I made for an actual product was a power supply. So of course it didn't work, but debugging is much easier now. And even for small projects it is pretty easy. And if you have a copper clad PCB with copper only on one side, after milling you can simply hold it against a window so that the sunlight shines through and you can actually see where you forgot to mill out stuff, or if all the milled out slots are deep enough and so on. So it's possible to use components that you cannot or have difficulty with sticking on a breadboard or even Vero board. For example, bigger components, the components with leads with a weird pitch. Or for example a transformer, I put a transformer on the PSU. That's no problem with this method, but it simply doesn't fit on a Vero board. Or terminals, that's all no problem. So I'm quite happy with this. So just like last time, breathing gets a bit difficult when I'm standing up, but maybe that's just a matter of getting used to them. One thing I also talked about last time was a overdue very small project. I have a DPS5005 PSU module, which is basically a DC-DC converter with a nice OLED display and a knob and a few buttons and actually a menu, and you can select, you can adjust voltage and the current and your overcurrent protection and all the stuff is inside. So it is a panel mounted module for building your own PSU or building your own little system. So what I did now was take a PCB AC-DC power supply, a fuse, 2 4mm banana sockets and a power inlet, and I put it all in a small box, cut out shapes of the small box, put all the components in, put a lot of Bison kit or whatever it's called in there to hold everything in place, and now it's ready, it works, it's nice. It looks like absolute shit because there's also kit on the outside, but maybe that's free theft prevention or something like that. For cutting out stuff out of enclosures, cutting shapes out of enclosures to fit things in, if they're not round, obviously if they're round you use a drill, and if they're square, for example, I used to use a Dremel tool with a cutting blade or a cutting disc or whatever, but this time I use a soldering iron tip specifically for this kind of stuff. It's a JBC C245138 if you're playing along at home, which is actually a super sharp blade-like tip. It's a round blade. It's 1/4 of a circle blade with very sharp edge, very thin, coated so that the plastic really doesn't stick to it that much, and it's really, really nice. So this was the first time I actually use it, except playing with it, so I'll use it more often. It's really nice. Happy that I got that. So that was the stuff that actually happened. Now on to the stuff that may never happen. I talked a lot of times, perhaps too many times, about the Commodore 64 cartridge adapter that I made and some demos or track screens that I made for that. Put all that stuff on CSDB, which is a Scener's database. I think it's for Commodore 64 software and hardware, mostly demo related. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes. So that's there, that's fine, that's finished. I'll make one more track screen for the Home Computer Museum in Helmond in the Netherlands. Because maybe it would be nice, and actually the owner thought it would be nice to take a spare Commodore 64, put it against a window, and then have some demo running to tell people what they can expect within, and to with our logo on it and so on. So that should be nice, and gives me one more excuse for assembly programming. You may remember me talking about the luxury problem of finding another home computer system to play with. And last time I was considering the Redofin 1292 system with a Signetics 2650 processor inside, I think, or the Philips VideoPack G7000 or Odyssey 2, which has a 848, I think, processor inside. Both of these systems were listed on the Dutch second-hand sight that I mentioned before, and I almost got one or both, but in the end decided not to, because I have a perfectly good Atari 2600 Junior in the attic, and I might as well use that, because it should be fun to program with, and I should stop the amount of crap getting into this house, because it's ridiculous already. So there, it's finally time for the Atari VCS then. So that was basically it. I have some more plans, but plans are just plans, are not worth a whole lot. I think everyone has a lot of plans, but let's focus a little bit more on the stuff I actually did, and less on stuff that might never even happen. Next up are the upcoming events. First of all is the Hackalot exhibition of a new location. Now Hackalot is an organization or an upcoming hackerspace in Eindhoven in the Netherlands. And they've been searching for a location for a while, and apparently they found something. And June 21st there is a exhibition or an open evening or whatever it's called for this new location. So I'll go there. If you're interested, I'll put a link in the show notes to the Hackalot site, and you can go from there to this exhibition info. At June 29th is the Indigo Game Festival. It's an independent game festival in Utrecht in the Netherlands. I'm going there just to look what's up. I've never been there, so just to get ideas, like I mentioned last time. And finally, the July 1st, the IFCOM starts their registration. So I'm planning to do something for that, and it should be quite fun. But you'll probably hear more about that then. So that was all for now. For more information, links and previous episodes, visit podcast.cba.si. Stay tuned, thanks for listening, and goodbye.